The legends were whispered in hushed tones across every spaceport and shadowed cantina in the galaxy. Tales of the Groks. They were more than just predators. They were nightmares given flesh. Their eyes blazed with otherworldly colors, shifting hues that pulsed with predatory hunger. Their hides, shimmering scales that defied any known armor, rippled over impossibly powerful muscles. Their roars echoed with a resonance that could shake the hull plating of a cruiser. Stories abounded of Groks tearing through legions of heavily armed troops, of planets surrendered to their ravenous dominion, of entire fleets vanishing into the interstellar void, only to leave whispers of scaled monstrosities lurking in the nebulae. For centuries, the civilizations of the Milky Way had learned and relearned a single lesson. The Groks could not be tamed, could not be reasoned with, and could not be stopped. But humans were new to the galactic game. We had arrived with our patchwork ships, our insatiable curiosity, and that irrepressible spark that had taken us from mud huts to towering star scrapers. To the elder races, we were audacious, perhaps even reckless. My name is Dr. Alex Tanner, and the irony of the title never escaped me. To say I was a biologist was a massive understatement. I was obsessed with life in all its strange and wonderful forms. The moment I laid eyes on a crude holograph of a Grox, I knew I'd found my calling. Others called it insanity. I called it opportunity. Word on the vine was that a Grox pack had established its territory on the desolate frontier moon of Erebos 4. No one in their right mind ventured anywhere near that system, but there I was, crammed into a battered freighter with a handful of grad students, who were either die-hard idealists or owed me a lot of favors. Final equipment check! I barked over the comms, my voice tight with a mixture of anticipation and nerves. Harmonic stabilizers online? Neurodampeners synced? A series of garbled affirmatives was my only reassurance. We weren't out here with plasma rifles or orbital bombardment protocols. Our arsenal was a hodgepodge of untested theory and desperate hope. The Erebos system was a graveyard of flickering stars and barren planetoids. Erebos 4 was a desolate rock bathed in the dim radiation of a red dwarf. We cut engines on the dark side, landing with a shuddering thump that rattled through the hull. The students looked like they might lose their lunches, faces pale as the moonscape outside. "Welcome to Grox country, kids," I said, trying to inject some levity into the oppressive atmosphere. "Now, remember the theory." The core principle was deceptively simple. The elder races, with their reliance on hard tech and brute force, had tried to dominate the Groks, suppress their primal instincts. My hunch was the opposite. The key lay in understanding their nature, to tap into their pack instincts on their own terms. We had spent months reverse engineering Grok's pheromones, studying every scrap of behavioral data smuggled off-world. Alpha identification is key, I drilled as we stepped into the frigid airlock. Remember, their social hierarchy is more rigid than Durasteel. Armed with emitters and sensor packs, we fanned out across the cratered landscape. The silence was deafening, punctuated only by the steady crunch of our boots on the ash-like soil. The first glimpse was not what I'd expected. A flicker of movement, a splash of iridescent crimson against the black rock. Not a hulking behemoth, but a sleek, almost juvenile form, its eyes burning like embers against a sapphire hide. "Hold!" I hissed, raising a hand. My heart jackhammered as the young Groks pivoted, sniffing the air. We froze, statues amidst the lunar waste. Its nostrils flared, a low growl rumbling deep in its throat. The emitter in my hand felt pitifully inadequate. This was the test. We were banking on the idea that these creatures, however feral, still retained a complex, instinctual language. The emitter pulsed out a synthesized cocktail of pheromones, carefully sequenced to project submission and establish a non-threatening presence. Time stretched like elastic, each second of tense silence an eternity. The Grox tilted its massive head, the crimson glow of its eyes flickering. Then, with surprising agility, it bounded away, disappearing behind a field of jagged rock. A collective sigh of relief rippled through the comms. "Not bad for a first encounter," I quipped, attempting to mask my own pounding pulse. But remember, this was just a scout. It took 3 more agonizing cycles of the moon to finally catch a glimpse of an adult Grox, a colossal beast with scales like polished amethysts, rippling with raw, terrifying power. Our sensor spiked as it passed within a hair's breadth of our concealed position, the ground vibrating beneath our boots. Its roar sent a primal chill down my spine, equal parts fear and awe. This was the true challenge. It would take more than synthesized pheromones to sway a creature of this magnitude. We now knew. This was where the lines between theory and practice blurred into a dangerous dance. Days bled into sleepless nights. Patience, I reminded myself, was a weapon we humans possessed in abundance. The elder races had scoffed at our lack of brute strength, our relatively short lifespans, but they failed to grasp the determination that simmered under our skin. We tracked the pack, studying their patterns, the subtle interplay between individuals. Our proximity was a dangerous gamble, a constant teeter on the edge of catastrophe. The students were stretched thin, frayed nerves threatening to snap. That was when it happened. Jenna, our resident behavioral expert, had been monitoring a subadult Grox. In her excitement, she strayed too far from our concealed camp, the signal from her suit flickering erratically. Before I could curse my own lax oversight, it appeared from the rocks, a blur of crimson and fangs. I scrambled for the emitter, fumbling through the sequences with shaking hands. Jenna had no weapon, no defense against the creature closing in for the kill. But the Grox never lunged. At the last possible moment, it veered off course, snarling and snapping, but ultimately retreating. I lowered the emitters long enough to catch my breath. Was it a fluke, or had something shifted in the creature's response? That night, huddled around a flickering camp stove, the theory began to take a new shape. It was a madman's gamble, a desperate throw of the dice. "We need to get closer," I told the team, their faces ghostly in the low light. Not just observation, interaction. The plan, if you could even call it that, was simple on paper and terrifying in execution. We would expose ourselves, vulnerable and seemingly submissive, armed still with emitters, but this time with a calculated purpose. One of us would become the bait, the catalyst for a response. It was me, of course. It had to be. The students saw the madness in my eyes, the relentless drive that had brought us this far. We fashioned a crude blind of woven sensor netting, hunkering down within a ring of pulsing emitters. The first long night I sat alone, heart pounding, a drumbeat against my ribs. They materialized out of the darkness like spectral beings, eyes blazed against the night, violent crimson, a swirling emerald that sent shivers down my spine. The air thrummed with tension, the scent of ozone and something feral stinging in my nostrils. I triggered a sequence on the emitter, the pulses of submission blending with a carefully timed undercurrent of invitation. My body was a coiled spring, ready to burst at the slightest hint of aggression. The minutes crawled by until a shape detached from the darkness. It was the emerald-eyed behemoth, the scales shimmering under the starlight. Each step shook the ground, a tremor rippling through me. It moved in an erratic dance, sniffing the air, emitting a low whine that grated on my nerves. But still, it held at bay. Curiosity, perhaps, wearing with primal instinct. The whine faded into a series of rhythmic chirps. Was that communication? My hands shook as I modified the emitter sequence, injecting a tentative reply. An answering chirp. Then another. We were conversing in a crude, primal form. Each chirp, each alteration on the emitter, carried with the weight of 1,000 possibilities, breakthrough, or a death sentence. Then, it was gone, swallowed by the night, leaving behind an echo of a roar, and the lingering scent of something alien. But that chirp, that exchange, it was a breakthrough I had been praying for. The pattern repeated over the next few grueling nights. Each time I felt the tension lessen by a fraction. The Groks were still cautious, still undeniably predators, but there was a hesitancy now. A curiosity that pierced the veil of pure aggression. The students observed with growling excitement, the fear slowly morphing into the intoxicating thrill of discovery. Then came Phase 2, the most dangerous of all. We devised a simple lure, biosynth material infused with non-threatening pheromones, laid out as an offering. With trembling hands, I became the delivery boy. Each step towards the Grok's den felt like a kilometer, each second an eternity. This time, they emerged quickly, drawn by the scent. I froze as the emerald beast closed the distance, the heat from its massive body washing over me. It took the offering delicately, a low thrumming rumbling in its chest. Not a growl of hunger, but a sound pregnant with uncertainty. One wrong move, one flicker of fear in my eyes, and it could all end in a flash of fangs and claws. Then, with surprising grace, it retreated, the lure safely tucked between its jaws. I tracked it back to the den. There, in the dim light of the cave entrance, something astonishing unfolded. The other Groks, the subadults, even the juveniles, they all approached the lure, sniffing and cautiously interacting with the biosynth material. No gnashing teeth, no displays of dominance. It was tentative, hesitant, but undeniably exploration. Weeks turned into months. The lures became more elaborate, laced with pheromones designed to soothe and establish trust. Slowly but surely, the initial suspicions started to melt away. I would hold my breath as the juvenile nosed my outreached hand, the scent of its hot breath ghosting over my skin. The alpha, that behemoth with the emerald eyes, began to linger longer during our nightly exchanges. Those eyes seemed to bore into my very soul. Then came the day I didn't think would ever arrive. It was raining, a rare occurrence on Erebos 4. The water falling in the thick, stinging sheets. As I cowered beneath the makeshift shelter, a colossal form slinked out of the haze. It was the emerald-eyed alpha. Alone. My first instinct was to scramble for the emitter, but something held me back. The Grok stood at the edge of the downpour, the shimmering scales rippling in the dim light. There was a vulnerability to it, a hesitation that felt utterly unlike anything I've witnessed in these creatures. Slowly, cautiously, it lowered its head, sniffing at the rain-soaked earth. A memory flickered in my mind. Old videos of earth dogs, caught in the joy of their first rain shower. I scrambled for the emitter, punching in a new sequence. One laced with playful curiosity, a muted invitation. The air thrummed with tension as I released the pulse. The Groks reared back, then with a snort, it charged. My heart leapt, but it wasn't an attack. It plunged into the rain, shaking its enormous head, water flying in sparkling arcs. It rolled over, exposing its belly, legs churning against the air in an unabashed giddiness. And just like that, something snapped inside me. The scientist with his charts and sequences dissolved, replaced by something altogether human. I laughed in a rusty, exhilarated sound, and plunged into the rain. There, on a desolate moon, on the fringes of the galaxy, I wrestled with a creature spoken of only in fear-filled whispers. The rain soaked me, mingled with the pungent scent of Groks, and for a blissful, impossible moment, there was only play. This, I realized, was the breakthrough. Not the emitters, not the theories, but the shared capacity for joy. That afternoon, the foundations of something unprecedented were laid. Not the taming of a beast, but the beginnings of a bond. Word of our progress spread across the net like wildfire. At first, it was met with derision. Humans playing with monsters. It was the ramblings of madmen. The deluded whispers from a doomed outpost. Then came the footage, shaky and grainy, transmitted back to the galactic web. Me laughing amidst the downpour, the alpha rolling in the mud at my feet, those terrifying eyes glinting with something akin to mirth. Then came the pilgrims, or rather the emissaries. They descended upon Erebos 4, those elder races in their sleek ships overflowing with skepticism. And they watched, their jaws agape, as the crimson subadult brought me its kill, a mangled chunk of Erebos wildlife, proudly laid at my feet like a grotesque offering. They observed as I sat with the Alpha, its head the size of a shuttle nested in my lap, running my fingers through the shimmering scales as I murmured nonsensical reassurances. The transition from taming to partnership was a long and treacherous one. There were setbacks, moments when the primal instincts of the Groks erupted in flashes of terrifying violence, but amidst it all, the bond grew. We learned to read their complex body language, their subtle vocalizations, and they, in turn, attuned themselves to our intent, our emotions. The emitters remained a tool, but a crutch gradually shed. News of the Erebos project rocketed through the galaxy, shaking the foundations of the established order. Elder races sent envoys, scientists, tacticians, all desperate to untangle the secrets of our success. Humans, those audacious upstarts, had achieved the impossible, not by force, but by understanding. The Groks never became pets, never fully domesticated. They remained wild, their predatory nature a core part of their being. But with them, we had allies, powerful and terrifying, yet undeniably bound to us by a strange interspecies connection. The galaxy would never quite be the same again. As for me, well, they started calling me the Groks Whisperer, a laughable title for a man who'd learned that true connection lies not in dominance, but in the shared language of trust, resilience, and the occasional belly rub under a starry sky. Years spun out. The Erebos project became a beacon of both research and daring diplomacy. I remained at its heart, the Groks at my side, an unlikely ambassador, bridging the chasm between human and beast. Yet the galaxy was a tinderbox, and every civilization eyed the potential power held in our bond with the Groks. The first flashpoint was the Tarith conflict. A ruthless, expansionist race had set their sights on a lush, resource-rich swath of neutral planets. Diplomacy failed. Conventional warfare led to a stalemate, a drawn-out bloody affair that both sides seemed destined to lose. Then came the delegation, from both the besieged planets and the Tarith war machine. It was an impossible proposition. Would the Groks intervene? I remember standing in the Lunar Command Center, the Alpha, now a truly colossal beast, at my side. Its emerald eyes swept across the collection of desperate faces and hardened generals. I felt the weight of their gazes, the hunger mixed with lingering fear. "The Groks are not your weapons," I said, my voice echoing in the tense silence. "They fight for their own, and for those they bond with." Silence hung heavy in the air. Then, a representative from the besieged planet stepped forward, an elderly woman with defiance etched on her face. "Then teach us," she demanded. "Teach us to be worthy of fighting alongside them." The council was chaotic. Elder races scoffed. Strategists devised reckless plans, and my little team fought for a different approach. For weeks, we shared our knowledge, our experiences, and the heart of what had made our connection possible. Respect for the Groks as intelligent, sentient beings, not beasts to be controlled. It was an uphill battle, but desperation as a way of softening even the most rigid of ideologies. The result was unorthodox, even heretical in some circles. Soldiers and civilians from the threatened planets arrived on Erebos 4, not to command, but to learn. And they did. They learned to shed their preconceived notions, to watch, to listen, and with painstaking guidance to forgive their own connections. The change was not swift, nor was it universal, but it was enough. The battle for the Tarith Corridor was a turning point in galactic history. At its forefront wasn't human technology, nor Grok savagery alone, but something new, a strange hybrid strategy. Soldiers trained to read Grok signals, to move in sync with their astonishing pack tactics. Groks fighting not out of blind obedience, but out of hard-won understanding of the stakes, the lives hanging in the balance. I witnessed it from the command center, the visceral feed of the battlefield relayed across the stars. It was brutal, a clash of savagery and calculated precision. But for every human life lost, countless others were saved due to the intervention of a Groks pack. There was a new rhythm to the battle, an impossible dance of human bravery and alien ferocity. The Tarith were pushed back, Their relentless advance shattered against the wall of teeth, claws, and the unyielding spirit of a people who had chosen to stand alongside the monsters instead of cowering from them. It wasn't a clean victory, never with the Groks, but it was a victory built on more than just weapons and technology. It was built on a foundation of trust. Of course, trust can be a fragile thing in the treacherous game of galactic politics. The Tarith conflict was a mere ripple compared to the storm brewing on the horizon. Whispers of alliances, of elder races eyeing the power of the Groks with covetous eyes. The galaxy still didn't fully understand, didn't grasp that it wasn't about control, but about the messy, dangerous, and beautiful act of choosing to understand a creature inherently different from yourself. The Erebos Project remains a sanctuary, a place where both human and Groks learn from one another. I'm older now, the lines on my face mirroring the cracks in the Erebos soil, but the fire still burns. Because there are always new frontiers, new monsters whispered of in fear across the star lanes, new opportunities for mad scientists and stubborn dreamers to prove, once again, that the greatest strength of humanity lies not in our domination of the galaxy, but in our boundless capacity to connect, to understand, and to build bridges across the vast chasms that separate us.